Welcome back to the Sandwich Generation Pod. I'm Robyn.
And I'm Eliesa, and today we're diving into a topic that honestly scares a lot of people: assisted living. The cost, the confusion, the guilt, the business side of it, and how families can actually make sure their loved ones are getting good care.
Because when you start looking into assisted living, it can feel like entering into a completely different universe. There's terminology you've never heard before, there's pricing sheets, yuck.
And if you're part of the sandwich generation, like many of our listeners, you might be raising young kids while trying to figure out what your parents' next chapter looks like. So today we're joined by two guests who know this world from the inside. First, we have Melissa Stanton. Melissa is the marketing director at Carefree Cottages of Maplewood, where she helps families navigate the sometimes confusing and emotional process of senior living.
And we're also joined by Mogren Katt. Molly describes herself as someone who does too many things, which we deeply respect as fellow overcommitted women.
She is the co-founder of Debunking Goods. She writes essays on her Substack, Hey Eleanor, and she is the author of the forthcoming memoir, Mom Jeans.
And her newest adventure is learning about the senior living world as her dad prepares to retire after running Carefree Cottages of Maplewood for about 30 years. So let's get into it.
So happy that you're here, and we're so excited about this because for a long time we've been like, oh, we gotta talk about assisted living, we've got to talk to someone about this because we have feelings,
a lot of feelings, and we didn't want to talk to anyone who was boring. So you guys are not boring.
She called it
because
right.
assisted living can get a little, sounds a little dry, but no, it's not gonna be. We are gonna liven it up.
Right.
No, I think it's really great. And I'm really appreciative that you guys are here and willing to talk about a topic that so many people wonder about. Mm-hmm. And so many people have different experiences surrounding assisted living also.
Some juicy experiences, some dramatic experiences, not speaking from experience, maybe I am. But okay, let's start from the top. Let's start from the basics.
How have you two women come to work together? Because I feel like this is an interesting story.
So my family built Carefree Cottages of Maplewood in 1993. My dad and his dad built this together. My family's been in the Maplewood, Minnesota area since literally 1900. And so we've got many generations that have grown up here. And actually in the 80s, my grandpa's mother had Alzheimer's and was living in the county care home.
Mm-hmm. That's all there was, right?
Yes, that's all there was. He spent a lot of time there bringing in ice cream and playing Santa for the residents. And he was sort of like, this sucks, It was just not a good place. So he was hoping to create an affordable place for seniors in the area. And my dad has done real estate development for a long time. So they found this property, built a handful of senior cottages here in the early 90s, and then built an apartment building, and it was just sort of run as a family business for a very long time. And then about 10 years ago, they decided to add assisted living. So I've been sort of not really involved in this business. No, I've known what's been going on here for a long time because my dad's been running it. My dad just turned 77 over the weekend. Wow. He is looking to retire and not be so involved. The problem is, who's going to do it? Eldest daughter syndrome right here. I've been coming here once a week or so for the past year, just trying to sort of get a grasp on what's happening and how everything here is working while also running my own business and taking care of my kids and stuff. And thankfully, I've had Melissa here to hold my hand through some of the process.
Melissa, tell us a little bit about you.
So I've been here at Carefree for probably about almost 3 years. And when I started, this was my first time in the industry of assisted living. Molly and I met through her dad, where I was coming up with all of these different kinds of ideas, just new, in terms of just making it better. And immediately he's like, you have to just meet Molly. You're visionaries and you just have to meet. So that's how the connection came. And I feel like since then we've been working together. And I think they've been going really well.
That's so amazing. And I personally know Molly. And it's, a big but small community here in Minneapolis, and we're all business owners. And I have had the delightful experience of having Molly come into my orbit. You need shit done, she's going to do it. And she would be the last person you'd think because she has a million things she's doing.
Okay, so technically speaking, what are each of your specific titles within Carefree Cottages right now?
I'm marketing director and site manager.
My main thing is just sort of trying to soak up the general how things work. The thing is, it's been a family business for a really long time, and so just making sure what's happening here aligns with our family ethos and making sure employees and residents are taken care of in a way that I feel proud of.
That right there is one of the most important things I think that you could ever have in running a place, though, an assisted living community is being the eyes on the ground and like seeing how caregivers and residents are equally having, their experience, which also is not an easy one in 2026.
Yeah,
Right.
it turns out also there are a lot of people that don't care about that. So you guys are already doing an amazing job.
Well, I mean, one of the things is that my dad has 11 brothers and no sisters. It's like a very big, very male family. But there's a picture of our family up on the wall here. And every time I come here, it's sort of like we open this place with the thought of like, how do we make a senior community that treats anyone in our family would want to be treated, or how I would want my parents or grandparents to be treated. And so it's like very personal, probably in ways that a lot of assisted living communities, aren't. We're not owned by a big private equity firm or have multiple locations to manage. It is important that people are healthy and happy and well taken care of here.
Okay, so again, can you just back up? I just want to start from the basics. Can you really just kind of explain to people if for some reason they don't know what assisted living is and they haven't experienced anything with it yet? What is assisted living? Paint a picture.
Okay, so assisted living is it's a community or resource building and community that seniors will go to receive assistance with activities of their daily living. And that can look like meals, like if they can't cook anymore, then that would look like them receiving 3 meals a day, perhaps housekeeping, laundry services, activities. That would look like also having full autonomy over making decisions, because independence also is really a part of the assisted living, in making sure that they never lose that, making sure that they never also lose mobility. And I think many people do confuse assisted living with nursing home, and it's the antithesis.
People do get help with medication and help with bathing and toileting and things like that, but it's not like you're in a hospital setting. You've got a lot of choices and independence throughout your day.
I kind of feel like it's like nursing home undercover. So my experience with assisted living is when both my parents declined in 2021, my sister and I knew that they were going to need extra help, that they couldn't live in their house anymore. And we're like, okay, what are we going to do? And so that's how we learned about, there's this whole world called assisted living. But when you go to these places, they actually present like an apartment building. So I was expecting to see like people in wheelchairs with IVs or something, like, I don't know. But when I got there, it was like, it's an apartment building. And then behind the scenes, there's like bathing. It's sort of hidden in a way sometimes. So that was super interesting to me. It's sort of like the idea is to have all dignity and as much independence intact as much as possible, so that, contemporaries can come visit and like people can kind of maintain their life, but they have this support, and that support can grow. Maybe it starts out that you need meals, and then it can go all the way up to like memory care, or there's a range of the cares that you can get in assisted living, but it looks like an apartment building a lot of the time.
Yeah. It kind of feels a little bit like college in some ways here, where you're like have your dorm, except for our dorms are actual apartments with full kitchens and stuff. But there's always activities going on. You can come hang out in the lobby. There's a library and puzzle room and lots of field trips.
When I went on all the tours, I was like, I could find happiness here. I could live here. I'm like, there's a pub. There's like
Every assisted living place has a pub.
Oh yeah, and a happy hour.
And they call it a pub.
And a happy hour.
We have happy hour sometimes with live music. It's a big thing.
Yeah.
And every time you go on a tour, they cue they're like, there's George. He's on his way to happy hours. Like, I feel like they plant them there. So they're like, look how much fun we're having. And George is like in a wheelchair, or maybe just walking along with a glass of wine and like those little plastic cups that you get on airlines. That's always what it's like, always, right? It's George. They're like, hey, George. We love George.
I know
we
that
love
is
George.
here.
You know what I'm talking about.
One of the things I think I'm most impressed with my parents' assisted living is the prize table at bingo. They do a good job curating those prizes. You want to win bingo because you want to get a prize.
Your parents are like stars at their assisted living, aren't
My
they?
parents are characters wherever they go, so it's not uncommon for them to be very involved.
Can I just say that when I was on my star tour of assisted livings, I ran into her parents and I was like, they like got wind I was coming and they showed up behind the door in the window and they're like, hello. And I'm like, oh my God, it's them. I'm like, excuse me, I need to go see my people. It was the best.
There's a picture of you all together. We should probably share that in this episode. So my parents lived forever in a small town in southern Minnesota, and there came a time where my mom's health was declining a little bit, I guess, and it was harder for her to cook. It was harder for her to keep up with the housework, right? And so she was actually very interested in assisted living and was like, you guys, I think it's time. I think I want to look. Now, I think also her idea of assisted living is different than reality sometimes. And I don't know if you hear that. Again, assisted living has a huge spectrum. There are places that promise you the world and frankly are like total shit in terms of delivering on that promise.
Shit.
Or the promise of care, right? And then there are places that are like absolute
Gold.
Gold is a perfect description. But I think a lot of things in their aging process, not just assisted living, I think they thought a lot of things would go differently than they are, right? Mm-hmm. But my mom was very much into this idea of like, okay, not only can I get help with the cooking and cleaning, but she couldn't drive anymore. So she was really excited about the community aspect, the activities, like the happy hours, and just having some more connection and friendships. And on the other side of that, she has had wonderful, beautiful friendships, loved bingo day. She loves a happy hour. She's very involved.
She's thriving.
She is thriving in assisted living. Mm-hmm. But also sometimes that community, like within the walls of assisted living, it can get very small, just like a college dorm, just like high school. We have a joke that like there's no harder client to please than the elderly and their food service, or like the dining hall. Who sits where? The stories that come out are rich and entertaining.
Amount of times my parents talked about how they're like, well, we weren't invited to that table. Well, you know who's in charge of that table over there. And then I would go to the dining hall and I'd be like, you're scared of that lady over there who like with the bad dye job? Like, what is happening? What is the power structure here? It's Lord of the Flies. What is going on?
It is a little bit, but it's also amazing. It's been a really positive move, I guess, for my parents, even if it hasn't been entirely what they thought. I think it's also been more supportive in other ways that we couldn't have even imagined. So it's been both. But in general, the process of finding the right place for our parents to live in, Robyn and I have had very different journeys. But I'm assuming too, like Melissa, you know, when families come to meet with you, there's so many questions that people have off the bat. And frankly, I didn't even know what to ask first. Like I clunkily found our way along the way. What are some of the best questions that families can ask when they're first coming on tours for assisted living?
So some of the best questions that a family could ask, one of them being, do we accept waivers? And the waivers are, one of them is elderly waiver and another one is a Cadi waiver. These waivers are federally funded and they are presented to individuals who are seniors who are in need of additional support. So the elderly waiver, typically you get that once you are 65, and Cadi waiver you can get honestly even if you are not a senior, because Cadi waivers are provided to those who are challenged of some sort, physically, mentally challenged. And the waivers actually assist individuals with payment for the services. So if individuals are coming in and they have low income on a monthly basis, or if their income is only a Social Security, or if it's just a smaller pension, then there is no way that a family or an individual could assist themselves in paying for the services, because that could range from minimally $4,000 to $10,000 per month.
And I just want to interrupt for 1 second because I just want to like talk about my real experience here. Like I've been on like, I don't know, 10 tours of these assisted living places. I've been around town. And this question is, in my mind, it's a tricky one because I want people to understand that you guys are friendly about this, it sounds like, but this is like something in the gray area and it's nuanced that you don't know unless you know. If you talk about the waiver in a lot of places accept private pay, which means like you're paying out of your pocket. And most places in Minnesota, in my experience, require 2 years of private pay.
They require 2 years of private pay before they will accept the waiver.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So like you're asking basically, waiver is government assistance, right? So when you're asking about that, a lot of times what an admissions person from my experience was hearing is like, these people don't have the money. And I just feel like it's really important for people to understand the landscape here because I feel like we had a lot of doors shut to us because I asked that question. And I know it's important to ask because in my experience, we're in a place where we do have some money, but we know we're going to run out. So we know we need the waiver. So someone had instructed me to ask about it. And like, I don't know, is it good or bad? It's hard to answer that question because some people, like we were saying, they're expecting you to have 2 years worth of money for private pay, which, like you said, on average, $4,000 is very low. I feel like my parents are paying about $20,000 a month, which is like insane.
I just did an episode on medical assistance, and I think the average, like on average right now, the cost of care out of pocket is somewhere between $10,000 and $12,000 per month. And that is, again, kind of on the lowish end of what cares can come to be. So if an assisted living community is asking families to pay 2 years private pay, for easy math, $240,000 private pay, right? Before they will accept you on the waiver. So that's what you're talking about, Robyn. And I experienced this exact same thing when I was shopping around. And some admissions person told me, like, you should really ask this question before you even come on the tour because we will let you know right away if we accept the waiver or not. And I think it is incredible when communities accept the waiver because there are so many that do not. And I get it. Like, I get why they don't because it's a basically a set dollar amount, right, from the state. I love that you brought this up as the first question that you should ask, because even if families are thinking we have all this money in the world, we have $500,000, that honestly might not get you that far these days.
Right.
If you have two parents who need cares, right? Say that again.
They have some sort of health event within that too, right?
Absolutely. That's what happened to my family. We moved in for my mom's health. My dad had a health event literally a couple months after. And then they are both now on medical assistance and on the waiver. But we had these same conversations. And I was also doing the math just like Robyn, like, okay, how much money do we have? How far can this get us? But someone along the way told me that this is the first question I should ask too, is do you accept the waiver? And in addition, I just wanted to note this too. One thing I came across is, in addition to whether or not an assisted living community accepted a waiver program, they also sometimes only had a percentage of rooms that were available for people that were on the waivers. And so I don't know how your community works, but that was something that many communities also told me. Like, and I remember being on tours, and I'm sure you had the same experience, where I'd sit down with these people and they'd be like, oh, welcome to our space. Then I was like, okay, so my first question is, I think eventually we're going to need to be on the waiver. And they'd be like,
Their face changes. Exactly. And that's, first of all, yeah. And that's why I really want to talk so much about this, because is it the best thing to ask right away? That answer is up in the air for me.
I think so. Otherwise, it's a waste of time.
Yeah, but sometimes you have enough of a runway where you can get in the door and you can get the, maybe not even a full 2 years, but you can get a year and a half of private pay and then go on the waiver. There's a lot of gray area here. And I just think people really, really need to understand that assisted living is a business and these people are looking for your money. And sometimes they care and they're looking to care for your family. And sometimes it's a mix. I think today we have two people on that we feel are really looking out for like the humanity of people. And yes, they also understand that it's a business, but I just want people to understand that you might get a beautiful brochure and like it might look good on the website, and you arrive and you realize when you ask that question, like, these people are looking for your money and they might suddenly be like, oh yeah, you're not for us.
Or they also might not have actual capacity because they only have that percentage of rooms available. Some places also, if you went on the waiver, only offered single beds in a shared room. That was true. And so it came with a lot of like complicated different answers, which is why I think that's one of the best questions you can ask up front, because even if you have the runway, like there was one place I remember that I was like, okay, I think we're going to make it for 2 years, and then they'll go on the elderly waiver. So would this work? And I was very interested in their community. And they were like, yep. And, you know, when the waiver time happens, then they'd have to move into a shared room with a single bed.
Oh.
And I was like, what? You know, but if I hadn't brought up that conversation, like I would have hated to move my parents only for them to have to like move into a living situation that was absolutely not what they were hoping for, right? Because of their waiver guidelines in that community. So the spectrum varies. It varies a lot in terms of what different assisted livings offer, but also within that question of do they accept the waiver, what that means.
Okay, I know that we are talking more than we are asking questions. I think I just like I have so much I have like so much I want people to know. And I'm just going to say one more thing. Just one more thing. I am sort of in limbo about if that's the best thing to ask. If you are going to ask it, I do think a savvy way to approach it, if you do have some of a runway, if you have some money and you don't exactly know when you're going to be on the waiver, but you know it's an inevitability, I think it's worth saying. And I think it's worth saying a little bit later in the conversation after the tour, just to be savvy and say, hey, it looks like we are going to have a runway of 2 years or a year and a half. We know that the waiver is something we're examining. Can we talk about that? Because then it's not as black and white. That's been my experience, is to not come right out with it.
I think that asking the question like really early on is really important, because I think to equate this to like dating, right? Some people date just to date. And then I think you have people who date from marriage, and those are people who are going to be much more serious, right? And if you're looking for marriage, you're going to want to ask the serious questions up front, because you're serious. You want to be married. That means the things that you're looking for in your partner, you know, those things are going to matter, right? And you want to make sure that the qualities are there. And in terms of senior living, not every community is going to be perfect for the individual who is inquiring. So I think first off, ask the question, because if they tell you no, that means it's not a good fit. That means either you don't have the funding or your parents may not have the funding, and it's going to just allow more time for you to go on other tours where the community that you really need to be at is going to be open arms.
I love this comparison.
I can't agree with it though. You also don't tell someone like my mental condition on the first date either. It's like, you know what I mean? Like that's the fourth date. You know what I mean? So
maybe the move is to say, just so I'm clear, like let's just say somewhere down the line, you guys take such great care of my parents that they live forever, and then eventually they will run out of money. And like, what's the path forward from that point?
I just want people to be educated. Exactly, Molly. And I hear both of I think we kind of are all in different boats about this. And I think it's important for people to hear why. There is a lot of gray area here, and there's ways to ask the question and to be savvy about it so you understand what you're asking and what they're hearing. So that's why I just feel like that there's an education about this that's super important.
I think like as an absolute, there are some places that do accept the elderly care waiver or the Cadi waiver, and there are places that are only 100% private pay. Absolutely. And I think it is so important to ask this question at some point to each place that you visit, because if they do not accept waivers and you know that your money is not going to last forever for private pay, that's super important to know. Just like, because otherwise you will need to move your loved one again if you do have to go on the waiver and they don't accept it.
It's going to be harder. It's going to be harder. It's going to be so disruptive. One thing, our property here is primarily people who are on waivers, right? Yep. So this is, I mean, it's an affordable property. There's plenty of them that are around the Twin Cities. And I will say, with our place, we're kind of unique in that it was built initially for independent living, and then we added assisted later. So there's no weird roommate situation unless you want to have a roommate that you're bringing in from somewhere else. It's not like converted hotel rooms. These are full apartments with full kitchens. Even if you're getting meal service, you still have your full kitchen, and it's I just feel like it's like a very dignified experience for people.
That's amazing. And I think it's amazing to also point out that there are many communities that do largely take the waiver, because that is, I mean, even in my parents' assisted living, there's so many people who thought that they had all the money in the world. And frankly, they did. But their health took a turn, and the cost of care is so enormous right now in America that like their money just didn't last as long as they could have ever hoped. So they ended up, being on the waiver when they didn't even know that.
The admissions person where my parents currently are, which is such an amazing place. I love it. It's like an incredible place. And someone who worked there was just saying like, it's inevitable. And that was the admissions person who said that, whereas admissions people at a lot of other places stonewalled me when I asked that question. But, she was like, yes, we require the private pay. This is why I'm talking about the gray area. And she was like, it's inevitable that people are going to go on the waiver. Like, of course, like who can sustain these costs? And that's really the bigger problem here, that we could have another separate, I know we're kind of having a podcast about that right now because it really is such a huge issue.
But I think that goes hand in hand with assisted living, right? Like there's a reason that was your first question, Melissa, right? So let's go back to
What's
that.
your second question?
Yeah, let's go back to the question that families should ask. So number one.
I was getting all hot.
So second question will probably be about activities. It's abundantly tied to their happiness and their way of life and their mental health and their social skills. And that's actually a requirement. So in order to be an assisted living community, it's a requirement that you have activities. But if the activities are not designed in a manner for the resident to thrive, and to be social and to come out of their rooms and to be interactive and to use their brain and their mind so they can be apt, then it won't necessarily work. It's going to be a lot of resident turnover, if you will.
Right, sure.
I love that you brought this up, because when you go on all these tours, you meet the activities director. They always like bring that person out. And my parents lived in a place for 2 years. I never knew who that person was ever. Okay. I never saw them. I had no idea. When I went on these tours, like, the activities directors would come out and they'd be like, oh, come in my office. And like, George would walk by and be like, hey, activity director. And everyone would know them. And like, I feel like this is really important because they're kind of the beating heart of happiness in these places. And I feel like you talk about your activities director. Like you want to know these people because they should know your parents. You really do want to look for that person and see if they actually know the residents, if they're fun, if their office is open. I love that you brought that up because it is super important.
What kind of activities do your parents like to do?
Well, they decline most of them. No.
You know what, though? I think there's a lot of people here who don't go to any of the activities, but just to have the option. You know what
Absolutely.
I mean?
And they keep trying. Like Susie, shout out to Susie. She just keeps trying. She doesn't care how many times my parents say no. Yeah. She like finds it funny and she keeps on trying and she does get them to go to stuff. And I'm like, I fucking love you, Susie. I fucking love you, Susie. And she like put some weird necklace on my mom the other day. And I was like, yeah, fuck yeah, Susie. My mom loves it. It's just like, yes.
I'm always impressed by my parents' assisted living because they have like performers, like you said, live music, singing, dancers. They'll have pedicabs, but for different abilities. And so they'll have these like pedicab drivers come out and they take the residents almost on like a joyride or a bike ride, like around the neighborhood, like that organization is so cool. They do outings, that people can sign up for. And I don't know, I'm just always very impressed again that they just keep it going. They just keep it going for everyone because residents are in and out of the hospital. They're in and out of feeling good or, they've experienced so much loss in their life to get to the point of independent and then maybe assisted living that it's good, like you just said, Melissa, their mental health is directly tied to keeping them engaged. And that is such a great question for families to ask.
I just want to add this one story, though. I was the other day when I was at my mom's memory care, there's this woman, I don't know, her name's, let's call her Dolores. She's like a New York Jew. I walk over and she's like flagging me down. And there's a guy playing for happy hour, like on a xylophone or something. She goes, he sucks. This guy sucks. And I'm like, I know, I get it. And she goes, no, come here. And then she forgot. She told me, so come here again. This guy sucks. He's awful. Do you know what I'm saying? He's awful. And I'm like, it was so funny. Okay, sorry. Go on.
No, that
That's
was
amazing.
great. I think lucky for us, we do get a lot of great performers. Our activities director, she's so active, and she definitely plans an immense amount of activities. And what I love about what our activities director does, her name's Kelsey, what she does is she sometimes will set reminders for the residents that may forget that would want to come, and I think that is really heavy in our community as well, because during the process of admissions, they do have to go through a health assessment to be formally approved. And of course, our nurse will be reviewing medical records. And if she sees that there is a decline mentally, then we know that there's going to have to be some kind of reminder on activities to get them out of their room. Yeah.
Sure. Yep. That makes so much sense. So much sense. It sounds like you're doing a great job of like meeting people where they're at and not just expecting them to come on board.
Yeah, it would be completely hard to just expect them to come in and just get right in. We need those systems in place, and I feel like that's kind of what we have here. We have good systems for seniors, no matter what stage they're coming in at.
That's amazing. So, okay, so we have ask about the waiver, ask about activities. Are there any other first questions that families should be asking?
A few more, maybe.
Yeah.
So I know one that I get quite often, and it is about medication. And I think that a lot of families think that it's really great if it's necessary for us to manage their medications. But if we don't have to, and this is where the independence comes in, because a lot of residents and families, they're still managing that themselves. And to give that away is to give away like your right of choice, if you will, and your right to still have full autonomy over your life. So if that is that one thing that they still want to hold for dear life and just hold it really close, I always encourage that unless it's nearly mandatory that we do. But otherwise, medication management does not have to be managed by the community. They are still able to manage that themselves.
I am like hard nodding over here because I cannot agree with this more. I wouldn't have even thought about this, honestly, as a question. I think my parents might have asked that question, but I don't think I ever thought to. But as you bring this up, this is an area that matters greatly to my parents. And you're right that managing their own medication, and I will say that there's been times as they've gone through different health events that they haven't been able to manage their own medication, but then as they've become healthier again and more independent, their care plan could switch for them to manage their own medication again, if that makes sense. Like it's been a little fluid as their health changes. But I think in their minds, that's the difference between being like, okay, I'm in an assisted living community. I do need some support, but I'm still good. Like I'm still me. I can still do this. It is so tied to their independence to manage their own medications. And also it has been a gift when the staff has been there to manage their medications at times when they have needed it. But you are so right. And that's a great question for families to ask.
That can also be applied to things like laundry. If you don't feel comfortable having someone else do your laundry and you're still able and want to do it, yeah. Same with cleaning. If you would like to cook, sometimes no one's going to make you go down to the dining room and eat. You're still able to make those choices. And if you're not, then that's a problem. That's not assisted living. That's maybe something else.
And I love that you're saying this again. If you're shopping around, you're going to find a really wide range of people's attitudes about these things. I feel like we're very lucky to have Molly and Melissa because I feel like your framework isn't about so much of it being a business, but a lot of places are, and they'll upsell you. Like this is something that's important to understand if you're touring on behalf of your parents. And medication is one of those things where you'll say, this is advocating. My parents can do their own medication. You know, maybe you just lay it out for them because there are costs associated with all of these things that we're talking about. Me and my sister tried to advocate for our parents as long as we could and hold on to their independence for as long as they could because part of it was protecting their money too. It's their dignity, but it's also like, no, we don't need to spend money on that. My dad can do this by himself. And to push back if the place is really trying to pressure you because you kind of feel like they're trying to increase the bill, which is unfortunate.
As we're having this conversation, a lot of it's coming back to me. And I remember going on some tours and being like, okay, this is great. They accept the waiver. Okay, we can proceed, right? And, you know, they'd be like, oh, here's our wonderful kitchen. Here's our private chef. we'll do her laundry. And then I'd be like, okay, so what are the rates? Like, how much does it cost? And everyone has their own packages and care packages. And then there's the medical care, but then there's almost like lifestyle cares, right? Like the laundry or the housekeeping. And what some places charge for things, I was like, oh, okay. Or even like a haircut.
Yeah.
They'd be like, oh, we can have a personal salon person come in for a haircut, $100. And I'm like, we're going to go to Great Clips, like, okay. And it did feel like it was all of a sudden this a la carte menu. And knowing that we had a limited budget to work with, I was always doing the math. Like, wait, now what place could we afford to make that 2-year private pay mark? So that is true that all of the things cost money. Personally, we were never upsold on medication management. But one thing that I will say, I know, but I could totally see that happening. One thing I will say is that if your loved one is on the elderly care waiver, it does pay for the cares too that we're talking about here, if they qualify physically and financially for them. And so like my parents, they do their own laundry currently, but there's been times when they've needed help with that, right? So like that would be covered under the elderly care waiver. Same with my parents get 3 meals a day at their assisted living, and that is covered by their elderly care waiver. So there is financial support for these cares through the waiver should families need that.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to ask this question because you guys actually really helped me with this personally, because I was texting Molly on the side when I was in my crisis mode being like, I need to find a new place for my parents. And I will share my story of why too, because I feel like that's a nice juicy story to share. But you guys had some really good ideas about like what are some things to look for, not just questions. What are some things to look for that might be red flags, and what are some things to look for that are really like a must and a positive?
Right. Because I am just learning all of this. I'm so grateful to be included in this podcast because I'm learning a lot right now. But I had talked to Evelyn, our head nurse here, and I said, okay, I kind of explained your situation. And I said, what are some things you would look for? And a lot of it was like follow your senses. Like when you look around, do people seem happy? Residents and also employees. Are people interacting with each other? Are people just sitting on their phones the whole time? What does it smell like? Of course, like it's not going to smell like, well,
super fresh.
But I mean, do people smell clean? Do people look clean?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? It's like,
that was huge. The smell thing. Because I had definitely,
because sometimes they don't. Like we all know, we've had situations like there's always like one person at my gym where I'm like, you need to take a shower. But like if it's a general problem throughout the property, that is a signifier that people aren't being well taken care of. And you could have the most beautiful property in the world, and if people aren't engaging with each other, if they're not looking clean, smelling clean, seeming happy, red flag.
Now, I wish that I would have had that amazing advice. Like, it's so simple. Follow your senses. It's so simple. It's such a good tip. I want to share my story because obviously I am very passionate and I get haughty about it. So I'm really sorry. I do not mean to get haughty, but
Hella.
Okay. So my parents were at this place for almost 2 years, and, we met the director and the admissions person, and you're sold a bill of goods and you're like, your parents are going to be so happy here. And it was a place that looked very corporate. It was like a luxury apartment is how it presented. But then as time went on, that facade slowly crumbled. And what was behind that facade was a very sad story of bottom line thinking, meaning what we learned is the director, her framework was all about the budget. So basically, she would tell people that were caring for these people in this building, you have 5 to 10, I don't know exactly what the time was. You'll have only a certain amount of time to care for the people in this room because you have to care for this many residents in the half hour. So we learned about something called room jumping, where people don't have enough time to care for the resident, right? Because they have so many rooms they have to check off in an hour or a half hour. And so this causes a caretaker to maybe become very brief and maybe short and maybe rude to your parents, maybe impatient with the people they're caretaking for. This is what happened to us. As time went on, as budgets changed, you could tell like the food in the dining hall changed. Suddenly there was a lot of turnover. Some of the people that we had met initially suddenly were gone. We had learned that this new director was making a lot of financial changes. And then things just continued to get worse. Every week it was like so-and-so was rude to mom. So-and-so was yelling at your mother. My mom was showing more and more signs of Alzheimer's. which we knew that we needed to make a change. We knew eventually like my mom was going to need more care, but we were again trying to advocate for her and trying to keep her in assisted living as long as we could and staying with my dad because we knew that the cost of memory care was going to be so intense. And we also knew that memory care is very isolating for somebody, and we wanted to keep our parents together. So we're here in this lifeboat trying really hard to keep our parents together and trying to protect their little nest egg of money, and then we're trying to make sure they're treated well. And basically what we realized was like, first of all, these people were not on our side. And it became a war. They actually started threatening to report me to the state for elder abuse because I wasn't making a change with my mom. They had all kinds of reasons. They started to threaten my dad with like a lease violation because he had complimented a server. I don't know. Like they started to do all of these sort of hasty things. They would also call us and sort of scold us for things we weren't doing for our parents. But they would also be like, we're going to increase your cost for this. The bill would just go up and up and up, but the care would go down, down, down. My mom was calling in tears because someone was yelling at her. So it was kind of a horror story. And what we learned was like, it was really coming from the director. We really understood that like it came from the top down. But if we would have understood these things to look for, like the chemistry among people, we didn't know anyone who worked there for 2 years. I could barely name the people, just the director. We called her the principal. Looking for the chemistry among people that work there. How much are they interacting with you? How much do they get to know you? How much do they really seem to care? How much does the director really care? What is the ethos coming from the director? These are all things that I really wish I would have thought about before. Because the thing is, once you're in a place, it's really hard to get out. Yeah. It's really hard because you have these financial questions. You have the idea of like moving your parents who are already fragile. Yeah. I don't want to bore you guys, but it was bad. It was bad.
No, I mean, I saw what you guys were going through firsthand, and I was like, this is absolutely out of line. But unfortunately, there are so many assisted living communities that are owned by big corporations, and there's a lot of questions there. It can seem really pretty and shiny on the outside. And this is not just in Minnesota, by the way. This is like in the US. In the first season, we had a guest who was incredible, and she works for the Alzheimer's Association, and she was telling her personal story about her mom being in assisted living and then memory care and then having to move her mom. And she was like, the place that I moved my mom to was not shiny. She was like, it was not the newest, hottest place on the market, but it was family owned, just like your business. And it was, she was like, it was amazing. Like, I remember her talking about the woman who cooked the meals. She was like, at the end, my mom did not have her memory, but she did have the joy of food. And this woman would make the home cooked meals that she would make. And I remember thinking like, I wish my parents had that, because my parents' assisted living is kind of on the border. It's owned by a corporation. And so we have fought some of those battles. Turnover sometimes has been very high, but also on the flip side, you toured it. There's a lot of good going for it too. And there are some foundational staff members who are so committed and still there and are constantly trying to keep things on the up and up. Finding the right assisted living community is such a journey. If you know someone who would benefit from this episode, just take a moment right now and click that share button. One thing I also wanted to say is that if your parents are still independent enough, is encourage them to be really involved. And I bet that this can go two ways, because there could be a resident who is like, well, I live here now and I want it to be exactly how I want it to be, right? And I'm sure that there's constant feedback that they could be giving you as leadership that you're like, okay, that is possible, but maybe this is not possible, right? My mom actually, this is something I'm really proud of her for, is she approached the leadership and was like, hey, we're having trouble with some of the nursing staff understanding what we really need in our cares. Can we come and be a part of their staff training and talk about the gaps that we're seeing and experiencing? Not from like, I want to yell at you and be judgmental way, but from a, can you hear us and can I talk to you within the training and tell you about which parts feel like they're not connecting with us, right? And our director was like, absolutely, please come. But then she felt so seen and heard. But I think she got really good feedback from the nursing staff too on like, oh, okay, this is how you feel. Great. Let's try to incorporate whatever it was into our routines for residents. So there are some assisted living communities that have a residence council or a family council. And I think both of those are technically, I think you are allowed to have those from the state. We once had to work with an ombudsman, and that is a really weird term. And I know you have too. And maybe you guys can explain better what an ombudsman role is. But I understand it as like a liaison sometimes between like an assisted living facility and the resident, but a little neutral party that can sometimes help questions or get, conflict resolved, maybe.
Yeah, what do you do when there's conflict? And like, have you had the ombudsman situations?
We've had maybe a few, like very modest situations where the ombudsman would have to be involved, but exactly what you've mentioned, they act as like a liaison in between or an advocator, if you will, to advocate on the residents' behalf, because they have rights as well, and there is a bill of rights that every community is required to give to each resident, which has the ombudsman details in there as well. I make that very known upon entry, and even at the very beginning as well too. When that does happen, everyone is involved, and that's typically an ombudsman is going to be called or present to the community if something's going wrong, or if the resident feels like they're not getting their needs met. And when that happens, we have to open the door and begin to look at our potential inadequacies and see where there could be gaps for improvement, and start to fill in where necessary.
Do you guys have a social worker?
Some people would have a social worker, a part of their process, but because everybody is so different and everyone's process, it's, as you mentioned, it's so nuanced. So you might have someone who's in a TCU, and from that point, they are met with a social worker. But if it's just someone who's seeking, possibly through private pay, they may not have a social worker working with them. So it varies, but no, we do not have a social worker on site that residents can meet with on a daily.
Does your building have a social worker?
They do, yeah. But I kind of was thinking, people that have never been through assisted living, it's kind of good to know all the characters that are in all those different roles. Like, you've got your activities director, you got your admissions person, you got the nurse. The nurse is important because when you're getting in, I don't know if people know this, but the nurse and the director work together to figure out like how, if you're accepted, and they're the ones who kind of determine your cares. And so I think that's important to know. And then sometimes there's a social worker, which I think is important for people to know because they're just trying to like help you through a process. And then the ombudsman, I think, again, is important for people to know. So every city has its own ombudsman. And it's important to know who that person is, because if your parents or a resident has an issue, they do have rights. And the reason it's so important, again, I'm passionate about this to talk about, is because a lot of these places, they will take advantage of their residents because they're running a business. Again, we have Molly and Melissa here, which I feel like, because it's also family run and we know these people, it's such a nice version of assisted living that we're getting to hear. And my parents are in such a wonderful place now where they're not so financially motivated and they really seem to care. But I think it's important to know about the resources that you might need if you run into problems like that. So social worker and ombudsman. Our ombudsman that we called helped so much. When he came into this story that I was talking about, my director completely changed her tune. She almost changed the truth. She tried to hide a lot of the things she did because she knew that like legally she was out of her depth. So it really helped to keep everyone in line and to keep everyone behaving, basically. And it felt really good. It felt very empowering for me and my sister to know this person existed. It's just like it's something that I think is good for people to know about. Okay.
So what are some of the biggest misconceptions that people might think about assisted living when they come to meet with you?
One for sure is that they lose their independence. I think that's one of the biggest things. And as we've already discussed, there's so many reasons why and so many systems in place that make sure that they can keep that. let's see, that they're going to stay poor, or like they don't have any money and they can't live the same kind of lifestyle. And that changes, especially if you're on a waiver, because when you're on a waiver, you really only get, they call it personal needs money of $132 a month. Like there was just an increase this year.
Ooh, I didn't even know that yet. Hot off the, that is hot news. I've been still giving my parents $120. Woo, 132?
Yeah.
Come on.
So it's 132, and that's all that you get as an individual, and that's what you go spend and do your activities on. I think initially coming in, they're thinking, oh my God, that cannot nearly be enough. My life is over. You know, my life is going to be over once I move into an assisted living, because what am I going to do? How am I going to have fun? And that's not totally the case, because of all of the services that are provided. You're getting your 3 meals a day, your housekeeping, laundry services. 132, you don't necessarily have to spend on food, on laundry, on any services that the community is providing. So then the 132 can go on the activities trip. You can go to a movie. You can take the bus, granted that you're mobile. But yeah, you still get to utilize your 132, your personal needs money, to still maintain a fun lifestyle. So,
Do you have any good stories of like your favorite residents? They could be like difficult people or like really fun people.
I do. I met with her and her granddaughter, and she came in initially like she was so jubilant, and she was so sweet, and she would sometimes speak Spanish, mostly with English, but she was losing a little bit of her memory. You know, so when she came in, she was probably here for about 2 years. But I remember one day, like it was really on the decline in this stage. So one day she came and she had this really beautiful haircut. Before, her hair was like down past her shoulders. And the next time I seen her, I'm like, oh my goodness, your hair is so pretty. You got it cut. And she's like, what? It's cut? And she's like, like, I need to figure out who did this to my hair. I was like, oh my goodness. Like I started something, because she really did not remember. I didn't want to laugh, but she laughed. So it made me feel so much better. It was the most delightful that I've ever seen her, like just light up after, you know, because I could not hold my laugh in.
You know who else gets a shout out? I'm not going to use their name, but it's our George. He's a very attractive man who, I swear to God, you guys, we had a party here, and this one lady was like, are you single? How's it going? Like totally fawning over this man he's cute.
He is cute.
But he's like a closer here, because Melissa said whenever he's like doing a tour, if someone sees him, they're like, he lives here? Where do I sign?
Yeah.
And he
That's
knows it.
amazing.
Because I said something to him about it, and he was like, yeah, the ladies love me.
I mean, again, going back to the college dorm scenario, there is a cast of characters in every single assisted living community. Sometimes it rotates, right? And new characters come in, but there are endless stories that I have from my parents' assisted living.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
This is so funny to me. Before even like coming into this industry, there were these things that I probably would never have considered. But there was this woman, she was really new, really new. One day she was like dressed in like this gown, like this, not a ball gown, but it was like really flowy, almost like summer dress, beach dress, but it was flowing, and she was like running down the hallway. And later we found out that she was actually coming from like a guy's apartment.
Oh, it's like a walk of shame?
Yeah.
More shame.
Really? She was like, she was gone. She took off in a sprint, and all you could see was her dress just kind of flowing as she's running. And it was just hilarious, because afterward we were like, where was she going and why was she running? And it's just funny, because like finding out that this was the reason why, and the dialogue starting off, like they're still humans, and they still.
Wait, was she a
have their life.
resident?
Yeah.
Or was she was a resident? She wasn't a lady of the night. She was a resident. Okay. Okay.
We are all human until the day we die, right? That just never leaves.
If it works, it works.
Okay, so can we quickly talk about the cost? Because I feel like this is just something that in general people are like alarmed by, right? I mean, I still am to this day. You don't have to answer for assisted living as a whole, but can you enlighten us a little bit? Like, why is the cost of care in America so high right now? Like, what is going on?
I think a lot of the cost is going to the people who's taking care of the family. If you don't have the right kind of staff, then the community won't exist. So I think a lot of the cost is attributed to payroll, if you will. So, but outside of that, you do have the services, the meals. If we're looking at it from the business side of things, that costs money. You have to place the orders. You have to make sure that the housekeepers are taking care. They need supplies, everything, the activities, the buses that comes. There's an immense amount of things that goes into just the cost in itself outside of just the services. And then there's the rent, you know?
Yeah. I think something that I always am like questioning is like, and this is again, not for your community, but this is just for assisted living in general. So there is an amazing organization called Caring Across Generations. They're national. If you don't know them, you should. One of their founders is also the head of the National Workers Alliance. Her name is Aijin Pu, and she is like our hope for the future in terms of like care in America. They're the ones that are actually lobbying for better care. And that is for people with different abilities. That is for the elderly. That is for childcare. It's just like care in America, or healthcare system, right? It's just, they're the ones doing God's work in that regard. But they came out with a report that the average caregiver right now that is employed in assisted living in America is making $23,000 a year. And so when we think about, okay, so let's say, Robyn, let's just use your numbers. You're like, okay, my parents' bill for 2 people is about $20,000. That aligns with what we've also heard of, like about $10,000 a month on average is what you're spending. And yet one staff member is making only $23,000 on average in our country. That just doesn't math for me, right? And there's so many expenses that I can't even begin to know, right? That is also true in this business. But that's where, when I think about the corporate guys in like care in America, there just seems like there's a huge discrepancy in what people are paying. And then it's like their life savings, and the caregivers are getting paid so low, and they want to be there. I know that there's a lot of caregivers that have come through my parents' assisted living that are working that job while they're in school to become a full LPN. And so I'm so grateful for their care, but then the turnover has ended up being like pretty high, you know, because they just frankly need to make more money. I mean, that's true. That's true.
I'm trying to figure out too, because I have the exact same questions.
Yeah. I think it's just a question that everyone wonders about when they
I
enter
know,
this
like, where
space.
is
Like,
it all
how does
going?
the math?
I think this is something that if you're shopping around, you should really consider, because I wouldn't have thought about this, but like being family owned versus corporate versus nonprofit. These are, I think, the 3 categories. So my parents are currently at a nonprofit, which I think they still have their 2-year requirement of private pay, but there's gray area because they're a nonprofit versus a straight corporate situation versus a family owned. So I think that's something for people to consider, is like, what's really going on behind the scenes? What's really motivating this place? I think it's really important for people to think about that, especially when they're taking their finances into consideration.
I have to mention, so my mother-in-law actually does in-home care for adults, for elderly adults, and she's worked with a lot of Alzheimer's patients. But they live on a farm, and in the farmhouse, she has 5 bedrooms, and she has staff that comes in, and she is a caregiver for the elderly, but she is not considered assisted living. She is not considered a nursing home. I believe her license is for adult foster care. Yeah. Yep. And so she has hospice come in whenever it's time. Whenever we go up to the farm, which is often, her ladies are there, but our kids go into that side of the farmhouse and they help them decorate for Halloween. And it's a really interesting business, I guess is what I'm saying. But a few of these do exist in our state where it's very much in home. I mean, you cannot get more of a home cooked meal than that. She does have some people on private pay, and she sets her rates for that, but she does also accept the waiver. And like you said, Melissa, earlier, there is kind of a courtship. She very much visits the family. She knows the questions to ask. She is very upfront about, like, can I be the proper care that you need? Will this be a good fit? Will your personality fit with my other residents? Because it's so small, right? So she is very cognizant about who she accepts.
Yeah.
But it's also so magical because I'm like, man, these people get to like live on the farm, which is fantastic. You know, the farm is also on a lake. So it's like they get these amazing views. They get this amazing food. They get this amazing care and love. I'm so happy for the families that are there because I think that's a very unique experience that is very similar to assisted living. And if she wasn't my mother-in-law, I wouldn't know that that existed because it is very small town, rural.
But it sounds like what we're working through is that there's a really wide range of places. We used a Navigator, which was an interesting experience.
Can you tell us what a Navigator is?
Yeah. Oh my God. Can we
This
talk
did not
about
really
this?
exist when I was
It
looking.
did probably, but you didn't know. Okay, so a Navigator is, there are services out there that basically will help you find an assisted living place. Sounds like a good idea. Maybe some of them are. Again, try to get a referral on those, because some people, they basically will call around to different assisted living places and they'll get you an appointment and they'll come with you and like help ask you questions that you might not know what questions to ask. A lot of them get paid by the place because it's basically a finder's fee. So like if you get into the place, then the place has to pay them a percentage. So it's kind of like being a recruiter or something.
Yeah.
But then the admissions person and the Navigator are kind of like working together because they both kind of get a financial benefit from it. And I'm not saying that's terrible. Some of them are really good, but a lot of them are financially motivated. So I'm kind of like, some Navigators, they're not all created equal, let's just say. Also, sometimes if the assisted living place already has your name as a referral from some other place, they'll find a way not to pay that Navigator. So those people kind of get screwed. I guess, again, assisted living a lot of times is a business and there's a lot going on behind the scenes. There's a lot of money to be made by people. I'm not saying that that is the case here today.
I would say maybe
We'll leave it there.
if there's a family who's private pay to start, I would say start as early as possible. That way you have time. And then if you're on a waiver, most of what I've seen is that you don't have that much time. Because either you're coming from a TCU and you need to find a place immediately because you can't go back home. So in those cases, I think making the connection with the admissions person, and I think even what you mentioned, Molly, is using your senses, because sometimes it's the social worker and the case manager and not a family member. And sometimes they don't have family, so they're doing that sourcing themselves. So maybe it's the kids of families who's listening, or maybe it's social workers who's listening. I would say for the individual, if time is not on your side, then you just nearly have to just do what feels right. Just do what feels right. But if you are private pay, try to start the process as early as possible.
I think that's really good advice.
Something for people to think about is like some places have independent care, they have assisted living, they have memory care, and they have skilled nursing, which is kind of like what a nursing home is. And some of them have all of that in the same campus. Some of them have several buildings, and some of those buildings have all or some. So like there's so much to learn about. Like,
Another good question that I just thought of when people are first touring and asking the questions is, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, like in your assisted living buildings, if residents come in, they can stay in their apartment, and then as their cares change, they're still able to stay in their same apartment, right?
Yeah.
They don't have to move necessarily. Maybe if you had memory care, they'd probably have to like move into memory care, because oftentimes memory care has a locked door system.
Yeah.
Because part of Alzheimer's dementia is people they
want to
they
escape.
leave. Yep,
Oh,
yep. But like there was one place that we looked at and I loved that community. I'm happy we didn't end up there now, but at the time I was like, this is my number one. And they had an independent living side of their like campus, and then they had an assisted living side, and then they had a skilled nursing, and then they had memory care. They were a place that had all of it, which seemed very attractive at first. But one of the reasons I'm so happy that my parents didn't end up there is because of my dad's health event that we couldn't have predicted at the time. They would have been in their independent living apartment for like 2 months before we would have had to move them to assisted, which would have had to be a whole different move to a different apartment if it was available.
Right.
And it might, if they were considered independent, and even though you're in the community, it doesn't automatically mean that there are any assisted living apartments available when you need it, right? Or memory care, or,
Well, and again, I feel like we invited you on and we're doing all the talking. I am so sorry. So my parents are in a situation where they were living together in assisted living. We finally hit the point where the rules were the rules. And it was like, your mother can no longer live in assisted living. It is not safe. We fought for that as long as we could. And then we had to switch places, and the recommendation was, your mom is no longer fit to live with your dad. She has higher needs. She has to go into memory care. Now, some places, they will keep the married couple together in memory care, which is kind of rare.
That is
So
very
like
true.
the spouse can move into memory care with the husband or wife. So they like become a memory care resident sort of. And all the rules are different in all the different places, but these are important things to ask. If you know that one of your parents has dementia or Alzheimer's and they're going to need memory care, do you want your parents to stay together? Now your parents might be like, hell no, we don't want to stay together. So good time to separate. But anyways, these things are complicated. So then if it turned out that they had to be separated because they don't do couples in memory care. So then we needed to find an assisted living place for in the same building for my dad and a spot in memory care. And a lot of memory cares don't have as many openings because it's a very small occupancy usually. So we had to figure out a way to line all of that up. The goal is not to move.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to have to move because it is horrible. So the more questions that you can kind of think about, even if it's like 5 to 7 years out, you know, yeah.
Agreed. And I think too, like when you're mentioning memory care, is while you're on that quest too, it's nearly just asking that question: do you have memory care? And most people think that maybe their parents don't need it. And there are some cases where I'll get families in the initial process that there is a decline or there is dementia or memory loss, but they're not exactly sure like how severe it is, but they're only looking at assisted living and not memory care. So I encourage all the time to just broaden that path for themselves so that they can begin to look for the right community versus just assisted, because the best place may be memory care.
What's the most heartwarming thing that you've experienced as working in assisted living?
Well, I'm not sure if this is really answering your question, but one thing that I've been thinking about a lot is how I feel like seniors are so young. Like 65 is not old. These are people who I always say like they probably got high at a Rolling Stones concert. Like, we don't need more doilies, florals, grandfather clocks. Like, I am so done with that.
Yes.
We're not too bad here, but this is something I'm working on because I just feel like the place you're in really does affect your mood. And so just remembering that seniors are like younger than you think. And
they had a lot of sex and a lot of drugs and like a lot of rock and roll, and like they live to tell about it. And I just...
Right.
I don't know. I think it's important to like a new face on the old people.
That's right.
There's a huge difference in how our grandparents' generation thought about being in a home versus where assisted living is today. And so for as shitty as it can be, it also really has come a long way, and it will be really interesting to see where it goes from here. Thank you so much. You have given us wisdom today. Even in approaching this topic, we were like, who do we even talk to?
Yeah.
Because
we trust no one.
Yeah, exactly. But we do trust you. And thank you for being this voice today, because I think it's going to help a lot of people. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and hopefully you can take away some helpful info and tips. All links and resources can be found in our show notes.
Please share this episode with anyone you think this might help. And if you have a topic that you'd like to talk more with us about in the sandwich generation world, please slide into our DMs on Instagram. Our handle is @thesandwichgenerationpod. We hope you'll be back for more convos with us soon. And remember, no matter whose diaper you're changing, you're never alone.
That was great. That was really good. All right.